Hey everyone, Kevin here, and thanks for watching The Bottom Line. In this video, we're going to discuss air ride, and more specifically, if air ride is right for your vehicle, as there's many pros and cons that come along with running this type of system. And take it from me, I've had this S10 here for 20 years, and 18 of those it's been on airbags. So I have some experience with this subject matter. So if you're considering air ride, you're going to want to pay close attention because we're going to go through all the ins and outs and all the parts that are involved to make a system like this happen. Also including maintenance as well, because it's quite different than having a typical static dropped vehicle. So as I stated earlier, I've had this S10 here for a long time, and basically I've had it since brand new. And I've always wanted to do something with it, even back then. And so first couple of years I saved up and actually lowered this truck on 17s, and I think it was like a 5.7 drop or something really dramatic, where it was only a couple of inches off the ground. And hitting stuff on the road, it was really bumpy when that happened. I had that little travel in the suspension at that point, so it was a little bit rough. And also, at the time, I had gone to a couple shows. I was introduced into airbags and, seen vehicles that had air ride, and I was like, man, I got to do something like that. So I went to Musso Motorsports in Vegas, and we bagged it on those 17s for a while, and I was really happy with how the things turned out. But then I wanted to go a little bit further. I wanted to get, larger wheels, and, I put 20s on it. So at the time, it was, fairly large for the time, and drove it out to Texas, to Houston, Texas, to Extensive Metal Works, and they redid some of the work and, cut out the front, did some wheel tubs to make everything happen so it would lay on 20s. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been around for a bit. And then while I was out there as well, I had my buddy Corey Scott at Custom Works. He painted it, so it got its shine. But I can tell you, with the experiences along the way, that basically there's some maintenance that comes along with an air ride suspension, as well as, if you're thinking about, dailying it, I used to daily this vehicle, and it's a little bit of a pain to do that because, if you want to lay it out somewhere in a parking lot, then you got to air it up and you got to adjust it or something. There's some systems out there that help, auto level and stuff like that, which I didn't have at the time. But even still, you got to press a button, you got to wait for something. Maybe you got to wait for your compressors. So it's something to consider if you're thinking about something like this. So take that into account, that maybe you want to do it on a vehicle you're not driving daily, because like I said, there's some things that come along with it. So to give you more of an example of what it entails to have a vehicle on air ride, we're going to take a closer look at my truck. Getting it up, we have it on we have a switch box to control everything, but like I said, there are auto leveling systems out there these days, and they pretty much, you press a button, you can even do it have them set up on your phone, and it'll go to a certain height that you want it to. But like I said, you still got to do something, if you're going to adjust it. So I'm going to show you what I have going on inside this thing. So as we see here, we've got our switches, and we can go up, down, whatever, all that. We've got a pancake in the middle. We can do just the front, we can do just the rear, we can do all the separate corners, the sides, so, and then we got our Dakota digital gauges here, so they tell us exactly where everything's at. But like I said, this is an older system. Some auto leveling systems are a bit different. So we'll check out under the hood, show you what goes on under there. Like I said, this truck was rebagged by Extensive in Texas, and basically what I wanted there was that I wanted to keep the AC, and like I said, you have to consider many things, and trucks like this, basically they weren't designed to lay like this with big wheels, so we had to make some adjustments along the way to make everything work. So taking a deeper look, you can see there's nothing fancy to this truck. We got to a certain point where everything looked good, and it was, it's kind of complicated under the hood, so it was just kind of one of those points where, we had a lot of function going on, so it really didn't matter too much for us on this truck. So we couldn't, we're in California, we can't do too much to it. So one of the first things you may notice is that the stock inner fenders are gone. So what we did is we took a trailer fender and fabricated a new wheel well that, will cover everything up so that we don't get too much, debris, from the road when we're driving or anything like that. So everything's covered up. If we go to the other side, you'll notice a lot of things had to be moved. The computer had to come up, the AC box had to be cut and everything and modified just so that we can still run it. So everything's kind of tight in there. So these are some of the things you have to consider. So most air ride vehicles run on compressors with tanks, and that has a electrical draw. And to combat that, we got an Optima battery that basically has a better performance than stock, so that we can run all these systems while we're driving, and we're not going to have a problem with charging or the truck dying on us, because we had that problem before with a stock battery. So but another thing to think about too is that, you know, a vehicle like this, you know, it doesn't run every day, so we put a charger on it, so to make sure that everything's in tip-top shape and ready to go whenever we want. As you may have noticed, the rear wheels, they tuck pretty hard. And basically what that means is that we had to do a lot of modifications to make that all happen. So if we take a look underneath here, you can see some of that. So basically, this is a little bit different from stock. You know, besides the liner and all that stuff, you know, we added the wheel tubs and the center section cover. And basically the axle lies here, and we've got all the room we need for everything to travel up. So, you know, from factory, these things aren't ready to go. You know, they're not designed for anything like this, so you have to take this into consideration. So if you've got some space in the back and worried about that, think, you know, it's going to be compromised a little bit, because, you know, you got to make these modifications in order to make everything happen. So to help give everybody a better explanation of everything else that's involved in air ride suspension, like on my truck, we're going to get in the garage and get on our quick jack lift system and just kind of show you, you know, some of the stuff that I have on my truck. Upgrading to 20s, we decided to run a set of Bond Speed Huntingtons, as we like the simple 5-spoke design of this wheel. They're now wrapped in NT555 G2 Nitto tires, and they're sized at 245/35 ZR20. And the tires have great performance capabilities in both wet and dry conditions. And a little bit of a funny story about this truck is that when we first did the performance mods on the stock tires, this truck would drift, which is a bit sketchy. So when we got the 17s, we got an original set of the 555s back then, and the problem went away, so we stuck with Nitto ever since. And we're taking this wheel off now just so we can show you the front suspension in detail. All right, you could already see stuff, so we're gonna go ahead and turn the steering a bit so you can see a little bit even more. So here it is. Here's the front suspension of our truck. Most notably, here is the airbag, which can sometimes be called an air spring in commercial applications, which are used, you know, basically to offset loads in big trucks. But yeah, this replaces the coil spring that used to be here. We had to cut out some of the frame. One thing you might want to take a note is that you need to have plenty of room here. You don't want any sharp objects to come in contact with the airbag, because that can create a puncture. Heat as well can, you know, help puncture a bag, so you don't want any of that. It could be a dangerous situation on the road. You may notice that our shock has been relocated to the outside. It used to be in here where the coil spring was. It was in between all of that, but now we have the airbag, so we couldn't have it in there. So what we did is we welded a tab and got our shock in place. Some people think that air ride, you don't need shocks, but you really do. I mean, we didn't have them on this truck originally, and then our bags started to break in a bit, and they started getting bouncy, and it just wasn't fun to drive because it was just bouncing all over the place when we hit a bump or anything like that. So we had to damper the ride a bit, so we put that shock in. You may also notice we have a lower control arm here. This has been re-engineered to just basically help move everything up, also keep the camber to a minimum, so when it's laid out it doesn't have a bunch of negative camber or anything like that. We also added a drop spindle in here, and that helps with that too as well. So basically that's it. We have the stock steering up front, so everything works like normal. And this is just an example of just, you know, this is our truck, you know, and some of the fabrication that we had to do. But for other vehicles, there are offerings for like bolt-in suspensions or stuff that just completely replaces everything. But do keep in mind, you know, there still is a lot of work. So no matter what, an airbag suspension requires a lot of work to make it all happen. So yeah, so here's the front of our truck. So let's head to the back and see how that works. So sliding back here in the rear, we can see some of the stuff that's had to happen. You might notice also the frame has been notched so that the axle can go up. We talked about that with the bed, basically, where you needed some extra room. So that was key here. We go back a little bit, you can see we have a 4-link. So there's 2 bars, one on each side, and another set on the top. And basically that makes everything else. That replaced our leaf spring setup. And then for the bag, we have it on a rear cantilever setup, and this all comes from KP Components. And so basically, you want to create some leverage here. You don't want the bag to be just, you know, directly on top of the axle. It's a little bit of a rough ride unless you have like sleeve bags or something like that. So having this little bit of leverage here made for a little bit of smooth ride, and of course is dampened by some shocks as well in the rear. So go back a little bit more and just look at some of the components that we need and talk about some of the maintenance actually. So right here we have our tanks, and these get filled up by the compressors here. But yeah, that's pretty much how the rear on this vehicle works. Like I said, it's a bit easier than the front. You know, you can take the bed off of these trucks, and you know, it helps you out with being able to get inside in these tight spaces and able to customize everything. Things, you know, cars and SUVs might be a little bit more complicated than that, but that's pretty much it. So even though we have Viair compressors on our truck already, they're about 12 years old, and talking to the folks at Viair, basically around 10 years is kind of when you need to change these things. So like I said, ours aren't working as well. So we got this dual pack of 480C compressors, and they come with pretty much anything to run them. They have a check valve inside of them, so the air doesn't leak through them when they're not running. They have a filter to keep pretty much contaminants out, and then they've got a pressure switch as well. And this goes into your tank, and pretty much it tells the compressors when to go on, which is about 165 psi, and they go off at 200 psi. So that makes sure that you have air in your tanks and everything. So it pretty much runs all by itself, as long as it's power to it, and it'll sense everything and make sure you've always got air in your system. So we're gonna install these and check it out, and hopefully it gets us back to where we should be. All right, to fix some of the problem of our air system, we are replacing these air compressors. As you notice, we got one in. We also have this structure where the old ones were mounted, and basically, since we have the same compressors that we did before, the mounting point's gonna be exactly the same, so this should be pretty much a snap. All right, now that we have the compressors mounted up, it's time to connect them to the air system. You'll notice here that we have a swivel mount here. Basically, this is also a check valve, which means that if you pay attention to the arrow, airflow is going to go that way, and it's not going to come back, because we've had a problem with other compressors where the air will leak through and drain the entire system overnight. So what we're going to do here is put some liquid pipe thread sealant on here and to make sure that we have an airtight connection. All right, since our truck was already wired before, basically we just got to find our other wires right here and connect everything. And that should be about it. These compressors should be able to fix our problem, fill our tanks within a few minutes, and won't have any delays when trying to go up and down with this truck. So here we go. This is pretty much what makes our air system work, is this valve setup. And this is a bit older, and just the way we did it, you know, maybe a decade ago, with having all these individual valves. And the reason why we did that is we want to control on all four corners, so we weren't leaning or anything like that. But some of this is a little bit unnecessary nowadays, because they have smaller like manifolds that take care of all this in one tiny little box, you know, so you don't have this big old monstrosity anymore. But basically the air comes in through the lines here. We've done hard lines so that to avoid, you know, any heat or anything like that, or a puncture. These are more durable than plastic lines. So taking your time and doing something like that is well worth it in the end. So yeah, the air comes in, and this valve here is told what to do by the switches we showed earlier. It tells it when to open and close, and once that opens, the air comes in and goes through to the airbag, and you know, gives you a lift and everything. So talking about some of the maintenance, the diaphragms, basically a rubber gasket that's in here, they would go bad every couple of years, so we constantly had to, you know, work on these. Which is not a problem with, you know, some of the manifolds that are out now, but there can still be issues. Not everything is perfect out there. You know, you can have wiring issues or something that could make these things go bad. From what we hear, all the things that we hear from other owners of trucks like these. So just keep that in consideration when you're thinking about putting air ride in your vehicle. There is maintenance involved. It's not, you know, pretty much set it and forget it. You do have to look at these things and check them every once in a while and make sure they function properly. So now that we have all the maintenance out of the way, we're able to get a good feel for how smooth our truck is on the road. And there's one thing to think about is that a system like this, even though it's smooth, might not be your first choice if you have a high horsepower engine because the airbags are soft. So it's probably a better choice to go with a coilover. Now there is one exception to this. RideTech does offer what they call a shockwave airbag system. And what this is a tuned shock with an airbag around it. Now, it's not good to lay a truck out with one of these because you're not going to get a lot of travel, and you probably can't race your truck with a shockwave system because it's not going to be as rigid as a coilover. But like I said, it's a compromise between the two. But if you're going to be going for power, I would go with the coilover system. One thing to note is when you have your airbag system all set up, set it at the ride height and then get it aligned. I've had this truck aligned for a while and haven't really noticed any uneven or premature wear on my tires. So it's one thing to make sure you do before you get it back on the road. And that's about it. As you can see, they ride pretty smooth. So if you want to cruise low and catch some attention, airbag system's going to get you there. Well, that was a bunch of fun today. We got to drive our truck down the coast here in Southern California. And now we're just kind of taking it all in, reaping the benefits of all our work, basically. So I hope I answered all your questions about air ride and can help you make an informed decision on if air ride is right for your vehicle. As you can see, there's a lot of complications that come with it and a lot of maintenance. It kind of seems a little bit of a burden, but if you ask us, is it worth it? Hell yeah, look at that truck behind me. It's laid out unlike anything else, and it catches a bunch of attention anywhere it goes. So this concludes our video. If you liked it, hit that subscribe button, give us a like. If you had a different opinion about something, drop a comment below, and we will catch you next time.